Hey everyone, welcome back to Overshadowed. I promised to do another video on the Tonkawa and explain who they are. I appreciate all the comments on the previous video. I look forward to sharing more about Texas Indians and the Tonkawa and whatnot in the future. But let's talk about the Tonkawa and where they come from and what scholarship and, of course, what the Tonkawa believe is their version. So the Tonkawa are generally considered to be a Texas tribe for a lot of reasons. Culturally, they share a lot in common with the Southern Plains, Southern Texas tribes, nomadic tribes. They are a nomadic people originally, separated into as many as 13 different clans or bands of the Tonkawa. And these bands spoke similar languages, they shared similar customs, not unlike what you see with other tribes like the Muskogee Confederation or the Comanche Confederation and that sort of thing. So when we talk about the Tonkawa, we do have to keep in mind that from a European perspective, they're first encountered in Texas. The earliest references to the Tonkawa from the Spanish and also from the French indicate that the Tonkawa are found anywhere between the Colorado River and the Red River. And the first American to encounter these individuals also found different Tonkawa living between those two rivers. And so they're clearly found within the state of Texas, or what will become the state of Texas. But scholars have done a lot of research. The biggest issue, the biggest problem with saying that the Tonkawa are a Texas tribe is that they don't really share linguistics with the other Texas tribes that they are associated with. Um, Let me back up real fast and just tell you exactly where they're generally considered to have originated from. The general consensus is that they are from the area around San Marcos. So not really near the coast, not really near Mexico, but they're in the hill country. All right. If you're familiar with Texas and where the geography is, San Marcos is between San Antonio and Austin. And so the Tonkawa are not linguistically connected really with any of the other tribes, although I think more modern interpretations, and this isn't really my area of study, modern linguistic experts suggest that perhaps they're related to the Karankawa, another tribe from that general region, and then also perhaps maybe the Lipan. They have some connection to the Lipan Apache. Again, I'm not really well versed in linguistics and understand those arguments very well. Um, but the Tonkawa do exist in those regions. Up until about the Up until very recently, it was generally assumed that the Tonkawa were probably indigenous to Texas. But modern anthropology and archaeology have found evidence that the Tonkawa perhaps are from northern Oklahoma, the region that we consider Oklahoma today, of course. That line of reasoning suggests that there was a band who called themselves the Tonkawa in that region who melded together with other bands of different tribes that came together to form a confederacy. And this is the origin of the original 13 distinct bands of Tonkawa. These bands come together. They don't really speak the same language, they don't really have the same customs, but they meld together, and what you end up with is the band from Oklahoma is the tribe that gives its name to the rest. Where this starts to break down, of course, is that the Tonkawa is not a word that the Tonkawa refer to themselves as in their own language. Tonkawa is actually a Waco word, meaning they all stay together. The Tonkawa word, and I apologize, I'm not very good with a lot of Tonkawa words. I'm not very good at speaking Tonkawa, so I won't attempt to butcher their language here. But the phrase that the Tonkawa use to describe themselves is the real people. So you have a generally fairly benign phrase coming from the Waco, meaning that they all stay together. There are a lot worse words that tribes have been labeled with by other tribes that we use to this day, that just have been passed down from colonial times. When the Spanish or the French encountered someone, they would ask, what do you call, what are those other people called? And they would use the word that they used to call them. Not uncommon to the way we do things today. And so when we talk about the Tonkawa, those are really the scholarly interpretations of where the Tonkawa are from. The Tonkawa themselves, of course, have an origin story that differs in its interpretation. Their version of the story is something that I think we really need to delve into because it will tell us more about who they are. Okay, so I want to tell you their story in their own words. And so forgive me, I will be reading a story that is not my own. I want to make that clear that this is the Tonkawa tribal creation story available on tonkawatribe.com, and it's a booklet published in 2020. So let's just be clear that this is not my version of the story. This is word for word what they have published. In the beginning, there was a wolf-like deity called Hakonase. Hakonase is the owner of the earth. He brought everything into being as given by the Creator. The buffalo that roamed the plains, the plants that nourished the animals, trees to shade, fire for warmth, oceans and rain for regrowth. Hakonase wandered the plains, inspecting his creations and welcoming his fellow creatures. His fellow wolves greeted him as he came upon a small dome-shaped mound on the earth on the southern part of this continent known as Texas. Okonose was drawn to the mountain by some mysterious force calling to him. The clan of wolves and he started digging at the base of the small mountain. After several hours of digging, they unearthed, much to their astonishment, a strange new creature. This new creature was a human being. The wolves brought this human being out of Mother Earth. He was confused and frightened. He feared for his life in this unusual place. He pleaded with Hokonase to return him to the earth, as he would surely die in this new place. Confused and bewildered by his new being, Hokonase and his clan counseled with each other on what they should do with this new creature. After much discussion, they determined this human being is not like them. They called him Tikwanaktik, a Tonkawa Indian in their language. Hakanase and his council determined that since they unearthed this Tikwanaktik, that they should have a great responsibility to him. They dressed him in fine skins and taught him to make fire to keep warm, taught him how to use a bow and arrow in order to protect and feed himself, gave him their language, and bestowed upon him a pipe to commune with their Creator. They taught him all the things about life in this strange new world and those that were expected of and what was expected of him to the great Creator. After they had taught him everything they could, Halkonase told the Tonkawa to go out into the world and to live and to multiply and become the Tonkawa tribe. Should he ever need their guidance, a need or a want, Halkonase would be at his beck and call. So that's the Tonkawa version of how they came to be. There are several interpretations of this story that have been put out by scholars, and I want to share my interpretation of this story. So the big thing that we need to take away from this story is that the word Hakanase is not wolf in Tonkawa. It actually means coyote, very specifically just coyote. There's a separate word for wolf, there's a separate word for a group or a multitude of coyotes. And so, from my perspective, and what makes sense from what I know of Texas and of the southern region of the United States, is that there would probably have been more coyotes. So it makes sense that they would actually be referencing a coyote. In fact, the translation of other stories that I have that are focusing on different narratives told by the Tonkawa, different oral traditions, translates that phrase continuously as coyote. And you have coyote appearing in various other stories for the Tonkawa, giving them fire, giving them warmth, going to the white buffalo and taking one of its children so they could eat. So all those things come from Hakonase coyote. And you'll know in the story, they do say that Hakonase is a wolf-like creature. So where is this mound? This is a question that I think is a valid question. Where do they think they are originally from? In 2022, the Tonkawa purchased Sugarloaf Mountain in central Texas. They bought it, and according to their unofficial historian and former chairman, Don Patterson, this is the mound that is referenced in their origin stories. And so they very clearly are placing themselves in central Texas. Um, this makes sense because this is where historically we find them once the Spanish arrive. I don't want to disagree with them. I think that their version of the story is a beautiful story and it makes sense. It definitely speaks to several key things that you find in other native origin stories, namely that they have always been here, that they are of the earth and they are of this place. And I certainly don't disagree with that assessment. I think that those who want to say that they've only been here for a short amount of time are way off base, and that they have been collectively, Native people have been here for tens of thousands of years. That said, what do we make? How do we combine what scholars say and what indigenous people say? Well, I think it's important here to note that many scholars don't necessarily reference this story. The main interlocutor that I dealt with in terms of my research was a man named Thomas Giltz. He is a PhD out of TCU. He wrote his dissertation in the 1980s. He doesn't really he referenced this story in passing. Others do as well. And where they reference this story is in a habit that the Tonkawa have of never settling down. They're nomadic people. They are hunter-gatherers. They don't permanently have a home. They don't set up brick buildings. They don't set up mud houses or grass houses. They use teepees. So, what do we make of this? Well, most scholars would say that they received command from Hakonase to never settle down. But if I go back and I read for you guys what is actually in their origin story, that doesn't exist. In fact, it specifically says after they had taught him everything they could, Hakonase told the Tonkawa to go out into the world and live and multiply and become the Tonkawa. And should he ever need guidance, a need or a want, Hakonase would be at his beck and call. If there was an addition later on that the Tonkawa shouldn't settle down and they attribute it to this narrative, it's not a part of the original story. So to say that this is something that the Tonkawa hold dear and that they are adamantly refusing to give up is a misreading of the Tonkawa story and a poor misreading of history, because even these scholars tell us that the Tonkawa settled down and were living next to white settlements, whether they were Spanish or later Texian/American settlements. It is true that there are various conflicting stories about the Tonkawa learning to do agriculture. Some suggesting that they did agriculture when they were at Fort Griffin in the 1860s. Some suggest that they didn't learn how to do agriculture until they got to the reservation in Oklahoma, in Kay County. But whatever the case may be, I hope that this gives you an idea of the struggle in terms of talking about where the Tonkawa are originally from. I think it's safe to say what the Tonkawa say. And that is that the Tonkawa are from Texas, from a region that ranged as far south as Texas, as far west as New Mexico, and as far north as northern Oklahoma. That's probably the best that we can ever definitively know about where the Tonkawa are from. As for the linguistics, I leave that to other people to try and figure out. Um, I'm not an expert in linguistics. I don't claim to be an expert in linguistics. So I hope that one day they are able to find out how they're connected to other people. But at the same time, I don't think that's important. I don't think that's the point of the entire story. If you'd like to hear more about who the Tonkawa are and hear other stories from the historical record about the Tonkawa, I'd be happy to share them. Otherwise, please make sure that you like and share this video, comment, please, and of course, hit that button, subscribe, and hit that bell so that way you can be notified the next time I post a video. I look forward to talking with you all again soon. Thank you for coming to Overshadowed. This has been a great experience for me, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you.